Welcome to PVD, the show where Paul and I argue about topics to the death. Today's topic is all about Cyberpunk 2077. Let's do it. Paul, hello.
Hi, didn't I literally kill you at the end of last episode? And
It's
somehow
fine. It's fine.
you're back?
The doctors gave me some advice about, how to deal with the
Head
injuries.
reattachment.
Yeah, and they took all the pieces and put it back together. But
Okay.
I'm back to talk about Cyberpunk, back from the back in this mortal coil to discuss CDPR, Cyberpunk 2077, and everything that's been going on. The basic question that's just been on my mind since this basic PR nightmare has been going on is there ever a chance that they're going to be able to turn around the perception of this game and turn around what people associate with Cyberpunk now? What do you think?
I think there are two separate things here where there's redeeming Cyberpunk as like an IP and of the series, and then there's redeeming Cyberpunk 2077 itself. And I think those are kind of split now after some of the stuff we learned this week. They canceled the multiplayer standalone game, and they would not talk about anything past what they've already announced past this year. So I am wondering if they might be on track to kind of cut their losses, fix what they need to fix, get it back on the PlayStation Store, release this free DLC they already talked about, do the next gen versions, and then be like, okay, we're just going to move on to, the next Cyberpunk game, which we will not screw up as much next time, and we will integrate online into it from the start, which they've announced they're going to do for future games. So, I don't know how much they want to invest in this current kind of clearly very mangled game in terms of a total No Man's Sky transformation that some people are predicting. I don't really foresee that anymore.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I'm not as hard on Cyberpunk because I played it on PC originally, and that's where most of my experience was. And for the most part, it was stable.
I hear it got 9s and 10s on PC.
Yes. A lot of people point to that often. Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot on that platform. But the problem is the perception is that this is a bad game. It's the worst game that you could ever buy. Don't play it. And I think that's largely, and there's also a mistrust issue because what was advertised for the base consoles was basically what we're seeing in this trailer here, which is clearly PC capture, right? Being displayed. And people thought they would get that on their PS4. I think most people knew there would be downgrades, but not to the extent that it was. And the problem with that is I don't know how they ever regain the trust of people. And I don't think there is an option to have a No Man's Sky moment for Cyberpunk 2077. It's just that ship has sailed, unfortunately. But there are people like me who did enjoy the game, who played on PC, who didn't have as bad of a time, who put in, I don't know, Paul, how many hours did you put in? I put in a lot of time.
Oh man, I did one 100% playthrough on PC, which I think was or not on PC, on Xbox, which I think was 60 hours. And then I started 2 characters on PC for different play styles, like hacking and assault and stuff. And I didn't get all the way through those, but that's probably at least another 30 hours between those.
Yeah, I played
a lot.
Yeah, I played a bunch on all the different consoles for the performance review that I did for IGN. And, I put in a ton of time on PC to do the features that we did for IGN. And the problem is just perception. I don't know how you sort of come back from this. And yeah.
It's not just that the game is buggy and broken and stuff. And that is the bulk of it. But for me, it's also been CDPR before, during, and after this whole process. It's not okay, they released a buggy game, sorry, we're trying to fix it. They purposefully hid the performance on last gen consoles. The only knowledge we had at all about that was one interview where they were yeah, it performs pretty better than we thought it would on last gen consoles. That was the only thing. No one got review codes for that. So you literally, all the people who had pre-ordered it or bought it day one, you had no idea how it performed, and you assumed it would work and not be so bad and so broken that it would, require this deluge of refund requests. The way they handled that situation eventually got better, but at the time it was if you really want a refund, you could just wait for the patches. But I mean, their attitude this entire time has been, so poor. And like when I say like I'm mostly referring to just kind of like upper management of CDPR, who has been kind of the face of this, and the people that were pushing the game out too early. Like I know everyone else worked very hard on it, but like these little like yellow text apologies and that video the one guy made where he's like he's literally saying, we had this patch 1.2 with 8,000 words of patch notes, and he's like, yeah, in our testing we didn't see a lot of the bugs that you guys saw. And it's like, you're either lying or you have the worst testing ever that you just threw under the bus completely. Like there are no good options there. So yeah. I think it is more to do with CDPR and their attitude of this like, invincible, immortal, developer of The Witcher 3, and then the reality of badly screwing something up and like not really wanting to admit they screwed it up, and like not really understanding the gravity of what it's done to their reputation.
Yeah, and I don't understand why you would go on camera and double down on that. I'm like, if you turned on the PS4 version, it runs poorly. That's not 30. It's running rough. And when he doubled down on that, it's just kind of like, what are you doing? Why would you, like, clearly there's problems. Just acknowledge the problems and not acknowledge that you're going to fix them. You don't have to like pretend everything's okay. It's not, so that was a really, really bizarre reaction. So what about all the leaked free DLC? So for people like you and I, who I largely enjoyed it on PC, I'm still excited about the free DLC. And, I think the word of mouth is that there's a lot of negativity around the game, but there is still a community who did enjoy it and did get, the good stuff out of their experience with Cyberpunk. So hopefully the developer, of course, they deserve all that negative feedback, and all the people who are mad have every right to be mad. There's also a group of people who had a really good time with the game, and I'm glad they're getting some free content. Do you think that's going to change the tone of this conversation at all?
It could. Granted, we only have like a very loose list of possible leaks of what it is, and we have kind of the Witcher 3's free DLC to go on, which is mostly cosmetic stuff and maybe a couple missions here and there. And then some, maybe quality of life stuff. But like, even that, I think, that's enough to get someone like probably me and you excited, because I just enjoy, going around and like buying the cool clothes and taking cool screenshots, and like, if they even just had an option to reset the crime gangs and stuff, I'd go, clear some of those again and try and get some more loot and stuff. So I think the potential is there for the free DLC to kind of be a moment to return to the game, to try and get some new cars or guns or gear or cyberware or things like that. And that's just something that didn't happen in these first two patches and all these hotfixes, which have been almost exclusively about just kind of fixing massive bugs. And there are still just legions of bugs, but it's kind of a never-ending list. So in terms of like actually getting people back to play it, the free DLC is probably the first time that'll really happen. But again, it's not like full DLC. Like if you're trying to come back for like truly new content, like new story stuff, like I would not guess there's going to be more than like a handful of kind of side mission scale activities. So if you're just coming back for that, it might last you a couple hours before, and that's all the rest of the content that they've announced. So we'll see, but.
I'm very curious, especially because, if you leveled up your character, there's that one slot in your character build that's sort of been updated with the new patch. It says Relic on it now. So that's sort of interesting about where are they going to go with that, and how's that going to be integrated into this DLC. I'm really curious to see what they do. There's a ton of potential. They could just give me one storyline per DLC and I would be happy, because all things considered, I think the storytelling was probably one of the stronger things. And on PC, if you were playing with, the feature on that allows it to sort of adapt graphically to whatever you need, it ran fairly well. So it's looking great. I have a 3090 in the machine, so like I'm getting the best graphics, but I wouldn't say that's indicative of what most people.
That is not what I'm running, and it looks good on PC. It looks better than Series X, but it's not that level for sure.
Yeah. Well, so DLC, I'm down. Let me play it. Just give me some more stories. That I love stories in these sort of games, so I'm in. But
I'm just worried that it'll be like it's not going to be like, oh, here's a new like Judy, adventure story. It's going to be like side gig, Wakako, like go to this house and like pick up this dude and drive him to a location, fight some enemies. Like that's what I'm worried about, like new missions being like kind of based on some of the stuff we got in The Witcher, which were like really, really small missions. And it seemed like kind of cut content that they just like, all right, we'll finish these missions up that got left on the cutting room floor. I'm hoping we return to some characters that, even if it's not like major beats, like they introduced so many characters that where their plot lines just sort of like trailed off, like Lizzie Wizzy, Blue Moon, like Meredith Stout. Like these are all really potentially interesting characters, and then we had like 1 or 2 missions with them, and then they disappeared. And like I thought I did something wrong to like not continue their quest line, but they just don't exist. So
yeah,
I would love stuff like that to show up.
You point out very key characters that were brought up, but I really did not enjoy the voice acting of Lizzie Wizzy. It was so weird. Like it
not really a big Grimes fan.
No, it felt really detached. Like I know Grimes is a great musician, but it definitely
not a voice actress.
It stood out to me for sure. Another thing that's going on with the game though is they're now reconsidering multiplayer. Multiplayer wasn't really promised as far as I know. But what they've said is their efforts are going to go where they make sense. And the quote that I found was, "We don't want to go overboard or lose our single player DNA. We want to take thoughtful steps to build robust online capabilities." All this is going on while they just bought a studio in Vancouver, Canada somewhere, right? So what do you think's up with that?
They wanted to make GTA Online in Cyberpunk. It's the biggest game in the world. It's a money printing machine. Like they wanted Night City Online. And their original plan for that was to just do a separate standalone game after Cyberpunk. But I think they've understood that A, the reaction to Cyberpunk has been so poor that they might just have to do an entirely new game and attach online to it. And B, like the amount of work they have to do now is fixing Cyberpunk, and they don't really have the resources to sink into a fully online game. My guess is that they're probably going to throw everyone just at The Witcher 4, and that may have some sort of online component to it. I don't know. But if I assume they will return to Cyberpunk eventually, but again, I think they're just going to cut their losses on this first game and try and come back and be like, Cyberpunk 2, it's good now, like, and then have kind of an integrated online component like we saw with GTA Online. Like GTA Online is not a separate standalone game technically, or at least it didn't launch like that. It was directly tied to the exact same map. And it was just, kind of with alternate story stuff. So that is what I think they originally wanted to do with a standalone game, but too much has gone wrong. And I don't think they can spend the next, 2 years or whatever it would take making that instead of focusing on their next kind of big single player release first.
Paul, the other topic we were going to talk about is patch 1.2. Patch 1.2 is here. It's mildly better and sometimes worse. And they fixed a lot of issues and they made changes, but I don't know. What do you think about it? You probably got more game time than I did.
Yeah, I mean, I came back to it and I was trying to figure out like what to do, like to even really test it. Like I'm not a big like technical test person. Like I leave that to you guys. So all I really did was just kind of see how it ran on both consoles. It maybe was running a little better on Series X. Like it's been so long since I last played on Series X that I don't really even like. I had to go like read my impressions of how I felt it ran because I can't even remember at this point. It's still like the visuals are. It's a 1X game converted into Series X, so it's not like the best looking game on console. Still looks pretty good on my mid-tier PC. But really, the only thing I could test was police response time because that's really the only new thing that was added. So I shot a bunch of civilians because that's how you trigger police, and waited to see how long it would take them to show up. And it's kind of emblematic of the game state as a whole because the police AI system is so badly non-existent in the first place. All they could really do was like spawn the police around a corner like 30 feet away instead of directly on top of you. And that still sometimes happens anyway. So there wasn't a ton of stuff to test. Like there's some quality of life stuff like, oh, you can craft a lot of stuff at once now, which is nice. And like, that's great. But it's just, there wasn't really that much to go back and do. And it didn't seem like, okay, this is the time I'm going to finish my playthrough on my hacker character. Cause like if free DLC is coming, if more fixes are coming, like I might as well just keep waiting. And this doesn't seem like a big jump back in moment, which I guess it wasn't supposed to be, but there's no reason to return to it based on where I'm at.
Yeah. And over on IGN, NX Gamer did his performance review of patch 1.2, and spoilers, it still is problematic and doesn't run wonderfully. So go check out his full analysis. It's over on IGN Games. It's one of the spin-off channels we're doing, and the performance reviews are posting over there. But yeah, there's not much else to say. Hey, it's still not well optimized on the base consoles. It hasn't been improved enough. It's a little bit better on the PS5 and the Xbox Series X. And the police are spawning in real time near my apartment.
There was the delay. As soon as I started talking about the police,
them, and now they've spawned here appropriately. So that's what it should be like in the game. No, but for real, like, okay, patch 1.2 came out. They addressed 900 issues, and hopefully the game's improved. But there were people on Reddit saying there's still problems. It's still
the whole subreddit is like just, hey, nice 1.2 patch, and then it's like some ridiculous bug that's still happening. Like that's like the whole subreddit right now.
Yeah.
And well, this all leads to the I wrote about this either this morning or yesterday. I don't remember. I've lost track of time. Too much Outriders, but where like when is like CDPR thinks Sony's going to let them back on the store soon. But like Sony hasn't said anything, and like literally people forget that Cyberpunk has been off the PlayStation Store for PS4 and PS5 for over 100 days. Like we're approaching 4 months.
That has to be so bad for their bottom line.
Yeah, I mean, console sales were down like in the winter months, like because you literally cannot buy a digital copy of the game on a PlayStation, like the biggest console platform.
Even PS4 Pro, it's like 80 million units or some insane number, you know? So, yeah.
And like, when does the changeover happen? Like, it seems like Sony's kind of like the game's never going to run well on those consoles, but like, at what point, like, is it passable enough? And like, Sony really only took them off in the first place because of the whole refund drama. Like, I don't think it would have happened without that.
Yeah.
But like, now it's kind of like, does Sony just want to like keep screwing them over indefinitely because they deserve it, or are they going to like actually relent and be like, okay, you fixed 800 bugs this patch, good enough? Like, and we have no indication of what they're going to do.
You know, I didn't even think about it, but think about what's going on with the PlayStation Store right now. They're shutting down a bunch of their stores. The PS4 base can't be separated from PS4 Pro or those stores, so they can't. Well, maybe they can. I don't know, but they didn't for Cyberpunk because the next gen version of the game still isn't technically available, right? Or am I mistaken?
So no, maybe that's right. That's not coming until like the fall. So like you're playing the PS4 Pro version essentially.
So I'm guessing they just don't want people to play that version of the game, and they're just going to wait for the next gen version before it ever hits the store again. Or it's just difficult. You know,
I don't think they'd go that far, honestly, because that's like what, another 6 months, like. Maybe, but I would be genuinely, but like that wouldn't even fix the problem. The problem is like the worst performing systems are the last gen systems. So like the next gen version is going to help that. So like I don't think that would be a cutoff point.
Oh, I'm saying release it on PS5, for example, but that's only like 5 million units, you know?
Yeah. I see what you mean.
But with the console shortage is what? They're going to get to 10, 20 million units sold by the end of the year? I don't know. But,
and Cyberpunk is probably not a must-buy on everyone's list at this point.
Yeah.
But it did. I mean, it sold, what, 11 million copies or something right at launch, and that was even after a bunch of refunds. So it sold crazy well. It's just a matter of, like, all the disastrousness that happened after that.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about all of the negative stuff that happened, and I just wanted to end maybe on a little bit more positive note for Cyberpunk. Everybody's made their voices really, really clear about their distaste of how this whole situation was handled. But I want to talk about the game because I think there's a lot in this game that was really, really good. So Paul, what did you like about Cyberpunk? What got you to stay in that world besides the articles you had to write? But like, what did you enjoy about Cyberpunk 2077?
I mean, I write articles about other games, but I wouldn't have written the volume I've written and still write. Honestly, I'm still writing about the game because I enjoy the saga and like I do want to come back to it for some reason. But there's a lot of fundamentals that it gets right. I think it has a very engrossing kind of core story. Maybe not the Johnny stuff per se, but like the Jackie, plot line, the Judy stuff, the Panam stuff, the River stuff, like all of those kind of companion branching storylines are very good. And then there's, some good side missions threaded through there too. Night City, like as a place, not in terms of like the buggy traffic and pedestrians, but like the entire aesthetic and vibe of the entire, city is fantastic. It's a place that I could have seen, potentially if this was a massively successful launch, and we didn't have these crazy issues. I could see that being like a world like a GTA Online or something that people want to go and hang out in and cause mayhem in, whatever. I fundamentally enjoyed combat a lot more than I thought I would. I was skeptical of CDPR's ability to execute first-person combat right, but there are a lot of very fun builds you can do. This is one of the only games I've ever played where hacking feels like a devastating, godly power rather than just like something to open doors, like to the point where it's like pretty much broken, but it's still fun. So there's just a lot of fundamental things that I do like about it, and I was willing to overlook so many bugs in order to just keep playing it, because I like those aspects to that degree.
Yeah, I do think there is something great there. I just think the negative PR just destroyed any chance of that ever getting a spotlight shined on it, so to speak, right? I really, really love the storytelling. I liked how Pan Am is sort of like, pensive about starting a relationship with you if you're a male V. And it's sort of touching when you get to interact with Judy. And I really, really appreciated that the characters stayed true to who they were and just didn't adapt to which V you played. So like there's so much that they did that was just really, really great storytelling that I really, really enjoyed. And there's actually moving moments with the characters that you get to meet. Like River, I want to know what happens with River afterwards. Does he end up doing anything else after you sort of come to the conclusion of his story? What's family life after the dramatic situation that he goes through? Spoiler warning. And I want to hear more about that, and maybe we'll get that in the tons of free leaked DLC.
I wonder. I mean, maybe they explain that more if you romance him, but I didn't. So I assumed he would show up in one of the endings if you picked him, but I don't know.
Yeah, and then there's the whole ending with Johnny, that like the secret ending that you have to do all this prerequisite stuff to get.
Don't get me started on the secret ending that I can never get because of how poorly they set that up. But
well, I've seen it and it's cool, but like, is there any continuation to that, or is it just that's it?
I think the game made it seem like it was not meant to be continued, and like I think if there is DLC, it will be stuff that happens continually before the ending. That's my guess. Is like there's so many different endings that I don't know how they would continue a single story past this unless they just picked one.
Yeah, well, like Hanako is sort of that's the point where they're like, this is point of no return. If you go here, you have to play through the ending to get back here unless you make a save. So they've very clearly drawn that line in the sand of this is where you get your ending, which will be unique. So yeah. And there are a few endings that are really cool. I do like the whole Johnny, like just going guns blazing ending. That was fun to experience. And even the regular Johnny ending where you go back on one last ride with, what's her name? His main partner in crime.
Rogue?
Yeah, Rogue. Sorry. Yeah. It's been a while since I played. But and it's just cool. Anyway, that's the end of this episode. Paul, I appreciate you coming back and talking Cyberpunk with me.
Oh, yeah. Anytime. See you in, 3 months when they release some DLC or something. But
the next batch. Yeah. And we're at the end of the show, and it's to the death, so fatality time.
Finish him. Friendship.
Well, Paul Tassie's my best friend now, so I guess you got to go check out his YouTube if you want to, but you can subscribe here. PVD is live every Sunday at 7 a.m., as is everything else on the channel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.